Welcome to Own Your Own Stuff, the way back to connecting with partners, coworkers, family, and community. Featuring your host, Jane Donovan.
Why is female connection so important? What has damaged our sisterhood? Who are our real sisters, and how do we start to connect? And what stuff can we own within ourselves to grow in the love frequency vibration and connection with our sisterhood? The establishment has for years divided us in many ways, and one of those ways is the sisterhood. We deeply crave and indeed need our female friends, those of us who get us, who love us despite our perceived flaws, and those who nurture us to be the best versions of ourselves. So today's episode is about female friendship, understanding the ancestral wounds we carry, why we need to listen to our bodies more, and how we can reconnect in vulnerability to grow our divine feminine connection. Hands up, who remembers being in the corporate world in the 80s and being asked if you had your period because you were passionately expressing an opinion and considered to be too emotional? And what about the corporate fashion of that era? Huge shoulder-padded masculine suits? We laughed off having our breasts not so accidentally brushed up against, gave the middle finger to the wolf-whistling building sites, and walked fast-paced, determined with eyes cast low through the late-night public transport trips, hoping to make it home safely from the city. This was my world of a time when I know I was out to prove that I really was as good as any man and could do anything I put my mind to. I look back now with the wisdom of time, and I see how I played into the hands of the Great Divide. Today, my guest is Catherine Eden, a doula and social worker turned cycles and circles teacher, rewilding mentor, and sacred business guide. With a foundation of honouring the cycles and reclaiming our rites of passage, Catherine guides people to go deeper in their work, master their magic, embody the art of holding space, step into conscious leadership, and grow and thrive in their sacred business. I start by asking Catherine about the patriarchal society and the role women are playing in the changing of this structure.
In the past, it was actually women who held the rights of the land, and it was the women that held the rights of the passing down of the name. And we lived in matriarchal societies where and matriarchy is not reverse patriarchy, which some people will say, if we move to a matrilineal society, that we would just have reverse patriarchy. And people come from that, I think, because perhaps of the way that some of the feminist movements have sort of portrayed what feminine is, what feminism is, which is in some ways, in some realms, taking on quite a patriarchal ideology to be equal to men rather than seeing a difference. Previously, because women had the ability to give birth, this mysterious thing that happens that creates all humans, all life on this earth begins with birth, whether it be humans, animals, plants, the season, everything begins with birth. Everything began in the womb, and everything began, with women or with the feminine, separate from gender, but the feminine, like the energy of the feminine in the womb, like space. And so we need to reclaim the power of that, because we were disconnected from that in order to remove us from our power. And the masculine was about revering this mysterious power of being able to be fertile, both in giving birth and in the land. And the blood, like the menstrual blood, was sacred, because not only did it bring forth life for humans, but it also brought forth life for, manifesting whatever it is that the community needed, whether it be food or, supporting the seasons. And it was all interconnected with the seasons and the earth and the cycles, and together we were doing it. we were divided from the land, we were divided from one another, because we need to be together as women to be able to be the caretakers of the children and the land. And we were disconnected from our bodies. And so those three very specific things that happen in history is what has led us to where we are now. So the disconnection from those three massive elements is what has led us to this patriarchal society, which has destroyed men equally.
Yes.
Patriarchy is it's not healthy for anyone, any humans, to be that disconnected. So yes, if we reconnect women with themselves, with one another, and with the earth, we then enable this compassion. We raise up the empathy, we raise up the nurturing as a priority, and then we make way for the ability for all people to heal.
As women, we've often been hardest on each other, perhaps coming from a place of insecurity, jealousy, envy, resentment, etc. We have participated perhaps in the suppression of other women, the mean girl behaviour of gathering a tribe to gang up on another, or used passive aggressiveness to have another doubt herself. I asked Catherine about the feminine wounds that she sees in her clients.
So the common wounding, it comes back to those three things. So the disconnection from self, so one's own body and identity and self. The disconnection from others in terms of our ability to feel safe with others and therefore, have that level of compassion, and the disconnection from the land and from the earth. Because when we're disconnected from the earth, we're actually disconnected from ourselves, because we are so interconnected. Yeah, once you're reconnected with the earth, you're reconnected with yourself, and vice versa. So they're sort of the main three things. And when it comes to sisterhood, so it started with a disconnection from the land, then it was disconnection from one another through the witch hunts predominantly, and things like colonization, where we were made to feel afraid. We were made to feel afraid of one another. A lot of people had to dob in other women. It was predominantly women. They burnt women until there were no women left in some of the towns. And so this is quite a sex-based wounding that we carry as women, and we carry it through our mitochondrial DNA. So men don't actually carry that level of epigenetic ancestral wounding in the same way that we do on a physiological level. And so from those like witch hunts, for example, where women had to dob each other in, for survival, and they had to throw others under the bus, and they had to judge other women because they thought that it would save them, that's where we got those massive cracks. And then it was the introduction of pathology through medicine, which completely disconnected women from their own bodies and basically externalized all of our bodily functions that are actually incredibly sacred. So, women stopped being intuitive around birth. They stopped being intuitive around their menstruation, and they handed it over and said, well, the doctors need to just give me the drugs to maintain this because I'm dirty, or I'm not capable, I can't birth my own baby without help, I would have died. All these sorts of things that happen. And yes, there is a level of that, but not to the extent that we're seeing. So what we're carrying is fear. We're carrying massive fear and massive shame. They're the main things. And that leads to isolation, and it leads to judgment of others because we're judging ourselves. It leads to segregating ourselves from others because we're afraid of the judgment and exclusion. And at the end of the day, if we talk about humans on a physiological level, what we actually really require is co-regulation. We actually co-regulate together. We need each other to reduce our stress hormones and to bring up our calming hormones. So women have another stress response other than fight or flight or fawning. And that stress response is called tend and befriend. And what that relates to is that when we feel stressed, so we get a raising of our adrenaline and cortisol, what actually reduces our adrenaline and cortisol is to tend and befriend. and we tend to the babies and the animals, and we befriend one another. So we unite together in order to co-regulate and lower our stress, our adrenaline, our stress hormones, and increase our oxytocin and the things that make us feel less stressed, so that we're able to combat whatever whatever we're facing. And that's how women actually reduce their stress levels, is being together. But because we carry these wounds, these fears and shame, we've stopped tending and befriending, because that's actually really scary, because we're afraid that other women will judge us or exclude us or dob us in, or, you know, think that we're weird. Everyone will exclude from society, and therefore we'll be on our own. And honestly, that's one of our biggest fears, is being alone on the fringes and not being able to survive, because our survival response is to be together. And so when we remember our need to co-regulate and to be together and be with one another, that's how we lower our stress, we're able to start healing all of these wounds that we carry around fear and shame, and it actually lowers our vulnerability to the external narratives that profit from our disconnection.
Recognizing the wounds that we carry, recognizing how deeply these wounds play out in our life, I really wanted to hear from Catherine what wisdom she could share to guide us and to take action today to start to heal.
I think the first thing is getting to know your body again, charting your cycle, understanding how your cycle actually connects with the moon and with the seasons, and what's going on in your actual body. Because you ask a lot of women and they don't know, and they will tell you that their doctor told them to do this, or someone else told them to do that, and they actually don't know what's going on in their cycle. And yet our cycle, our menstrual cycle, and if you don't have a menstrual cycle, you still cycle. It's just a different way of charting. But our menstrual cycle is the 5th vital sign. So when you go to hospital, they will ask you about your menstrual cycle, because everything that happens in your menstrual cycle is a huge message for what's going on in your body. It will always show up in your menstrual cycle. Emotional, physical, external, all of it shows up in our menstrual cycle. So the fact that women are having increased issues with their menstrual cycle, whether it's infertility or, pain and discomfort, we're seeing huge amounts of rising endometriosis and endometriosis and things like that. That's a sign as a collective that our menstrual cycle is telling us something. We're not listening. So getting to know your body, and that's a really easy way for people to start. It's simple, it's cheap, it's free. You don't have to use anything external. It's all coming from within. The second thing really is to be able to step into a place where you can consistently have exposure to connection and vulnerability. That's my big thing. So I am a huge supporter of circles, sitting in circle with women in vulnerability, in a safe space. And look, I don't call them safe spaces, because safety looks different for everyone. So if it's not safe, at least it's a brave space, because you have to push through that fear that other women will judge you. And obviously it needs to be held by someone who can hold, has the capacity to hold that level of depth and vulnerability and space. You don't want a wounded person holding that space. But exposure to connection with other women and vulnerability, the walls come down and you see it. It's very difficult to describe what happens in circle, but the walls go down and the oneness happens and the connection happens. You see yourself in others. You can see that others are the same as you, and you can't judge somebody else, because when you judge someone else, you're actually judging yourself. And when you see the vulnerability of others, you see yourself and you just become one. And that's where our physiology kind of steps in, and we co-regulate, and our stress hormones go down, and we all leave on a high. And everyone wonders why we leave on a high. And it's like, oh, we're remembering actually what we're here for and what we were meant for, and what it means to be human, or what it means to be spirit in a physical form. That's really what we are, and that's what Circle does. That's what I work towards, and that's what I really believe will change everything. So the biggest thing is start somewhere. I teach circle and blessing facilitation to a lot of people, and their biggest fear is, I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or I don't have the confidence to hold that space. And the thing is that we just need to start. And when you're holding space for something like that, if that's something that you're organizing, it's actually about separating yourself from that role. That actually, when you step into Circle, it's not about you. No one's looking at you. You're actually co-creating an energetic container together. And we talk about the circle as shaman. The circle itself creates its own energy together. And so you are holding the space, and you're being the facilitator, and you're organizing all the practical human things, but on an energetic level, it's not about you at all. And so being able to remove your humanness and your ego from stepping into that space is a really big first step. And I think the other thing that people can do on a practical level is if you want an anchor in terms of how to start organizing circles, connect with the earth. That's such an easy way to start, and it doesn't feel exclusive to anyone. It just anyone, however you set it up. It could be a mother's circle, it could be a multi-generational circle, it could be a maiden circle, anything. And you can come together on pick a phase of the moon and talk about the moon, and talk about how you're feeling about whatever's going on in your life, and drink some tea, drink tea together, share food together. Just start somewhere. And the thing is, if you can't go too deeply too quickly, because everyone has those wounds that they bring. And so starting gently and easily. And if you feel uncomfortable, which you absolutely will feel uncomfortable. That's the point, because that discomfort is the point that will take you to healing. So moving through that discomfort together, and honoring that discomfort, and feeling those triggers and whatever it is that arises for you, that's how you crack through and move through to healing. So honor whatever discomfort arises and allow it. So don't feel like you have to sit in that on your own, that it is safe to be brave and reach out to others. And maybe not everyone will meet you where you're at, but you'll find other women that when you sit together and you're able to own your own stuff together and be uncomfortable together and talk about, I guess, the things that we feel most shameful about. Once we witness our shame, it no longer has power over us. So if we're able to speak it and we're able to honor that shame, our shadows just want to be met with love. So if we have shadows and shame that are hanging around, it's about having them witnessed. That's really what it's all about. Be witnessed in your stuff. Get to know your own body, because nobody will have power over you if you own it for yourself and you take it on board. And that's how we reclaim all of it, our power, our bodies, our sovereignty, our rites of passage, and the feminine can rise again, and we can reclaim the need for matriarchal societies again. For my generation, that we can move into the healed elders, and that we can support the women older than us to take their crowns as the matriarchs and as the harvest queens that they are. I haven't even really touched on menopause, but that's another one completely just degraded. We need these matriarchs and harvest queens to take their throne, so that we can pass that down and really heal down along the generations. It's a multi-generational healing journey that we're going to be on.
Like Catherine, I'm a huge fan of circle work. I love the way that it provides a brave space for the walls to come down, for vulnerability to be expressed, and for the connection to start to grow. And I love Catherine's term about co-regulating. I hadn't heard that before, and it makes so much sense. And once we witness our own vulnerability, our own shame, our own stories, our own wounds, they will no longer hold power over us. For more of Catherine's work, head to her website, catherineeden.com, or you can find her on Instagram where she does a lot of free teaching, and that is CatherineEden_rewilding. Thanks for listening. Have a gorgeous day.
You have been listening to Own Your Own Stuff with host Jane Donovan. To connect with Jane, head to janedonovan.com.au.